And now we're going to go back into DeFi land with CEO of Binance and Jamie. So look forward to a really insightful conversation, and look forward to wrapping this up later. But over to you, Jamie.
Matthew, thanks so much. I thought you'd actually frozen there, the screen, but I think you were just sitting incredibly still for about 30 seconds. I might try that as a trick on people one day. Brilliant to be here. Thank you so much. And we've got CZ here, of course, CEO of Binance. A lot to talk about. And we're going to cover all sorts of different issues. But let's, I think, just start off right now with a bit of an origin story, because like a lot of people, I dare say, if they're honest, I got into cryptocurrencies in 2015, buying drugs from the darknet, doing research for a book. But I was fascinated immediately by this concept, couldn't really understand it at first. CZ, you got a much more interesting and uplifting backstory about how you were involved in your interest. Where did this come from, this interest in cryptocurrency for you?
Well, thanks for having me here, and thanks to everyone for listening. And for me, I got introduced to crypto in 2013 on a poker table with a group of VCs entrepreneurs, and I understood it relatively quickly from a technical concept perspective. I had my own PGP private key for emails back in 1998, and then but for me it was also like reading a lot about drug lords using this, etc. I wanted to see if there was a real community behind it. So for me, the real turning point was like I got to verify if there's a community behind it. So I flew to Las Vegas at the end of 2013, December 2013. There was a Bitcoin conference there, and once I went there, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a real community. It's a community of geeks, like young tech people who are very genuine, who are nice people. They're not drug lords or anything. And after that conference, in the airport, coming back from that conference, I said, okay, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna sell my house, and so did those things. So that's kind of how I got into crypto. That was back
risky business. I mean, did you ever think that it was going to sort of, you decide to quit and put money that you have into cryptocurrency? Did you have any idea that it was going to get to where we are now?
Not like I never really had a very accurate future price prediction, but I just know this is this is the future. So back in 2014, I knew like, look, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 20 years later, crypto is going to be everywhere. And so for me, like for most people, like I pushed all in. So for most people, that's a very high risk move. I sold my house, quit my job, and if things doesn't work out, for me, it would be like if things doesn't work out, I'll be back looking for a job in one of the investment banks or etc. like that. I'm pretty confident I can get a job. So the risk is if something happens to me, then that's not good. But when I was young, that risk I had to tolerate. So, but financially I was okay. So
and was there a politics or a philosophy you liked about it, or was it the technical side of the currency, or was there something bigger that appealed to you? I mean, we read about your backstory sometimes, your dislike of borders and these kind of bigger ideas. Was that part of your thinking too?
I think for me, I have been living and traveling across borders quite often, and whenever I have to, I worked in, I lived in like China, Canada, Japan, US, and then back to and then Hong Kong, Singapore, etc. So every time I had to change my careers, I moved to a different country, different city, and then when I have to do currency conversions, it's really a painful. It's a very painful experience. And when I bought the apartment in Shanghai in 2006, I was converting from my savings from my job from Bloomberg from New York into RMB. That was really, really difficult. So having gone through those experiences, I just knew that fiat currencies are country specific and they're region specific, and they have a lot of costs when you want to do large transactions. So for me, it was that freedom aspect of Bitcoin that really clicked to me. So I think that for me, that was the main thing.
But not a lot of people get into this, but they don't decide to start an exchange platform or an exchange market. I mean, what made you think that would be the direction you'd go down?
So for me, I think maybe because of my contacts in this space, like I've always worked in the financial trading space. almost everybody that I talked to in the crypto space wanted to start a crypto exchange at some point in their crypto journey. And so crypto exchange was one of those things that everyone thinks that it makes a lot of money, et cetera, but it's actually really, really hard to do. So for me, when I first quit my job to get into the industry, I first went into a wallet company and just sort of learning about the industry. I always had a couple other exchanges trying to hire me. And I actually joined a couple of exchanges before. But then even before crypto, I was working on futures trading platforms in Bloomberg, the Tokyo Stock Exchange trading systems in Tokyo before. So I was always in the trading system space. I was very knowledgeable I was relatively knowledgeable in exchange systems. My philosophy is always do what you're good at, do what you're interested in, and do what has value. For me, that's actually exchanges. So the exchange idea has always been in my head. The idea came up in 2013, 2015, 2017. And then in 2017, we thought the time is right. We'll take a shot at it myself with our own team. And we got lucky. It kind of worked out.
What's been the toughest moment? I mean, I imagine, given the way sort of regulators are thinking, the stresses of this, the volume of money that comes in, it must be, you're looking very fresh-faced. You're looking very like you're sleeping well, you're eating, but it must be a really difficult job. What's been the hardest thing? What's been the most stressful part of the work?
I think running an exchange is just very stressful generally by any common normal standards. But look, with anything, you get used to the stress level, and it's actually quite interesting. And if the stress level reduces, you actually get bored because you're used to that stress level. And this is the reason why when I watch movies now, most movies are kind of boring to me right now, because the thing that's exciting in the movies, like, well, we're going through much more exciting times than that. But more fundamentally, though, I think if you look at pure stress, end of 2017, early 2018 was very stressful. Most of the time, the stress is due to system stress. When our systems cannot handle the amount of influx of users, when we couldn't handle growth, that's very stressful. We actually never really had a stress point the other way, where most entrepreneurs face, which is no users. When your business is not growing, when you have no users, then that's a different type of stress. Whereas, luckily for Binance, within Binance, we didn't experience that type of stress. Whereas previously in my entrepreneur careers, I've experienced that a lot. But for the crypto exchange, we were just always dealing with more influx of users than we could handle. Even during the bear markets, we were doing okay, both on a user perspective and also on a financial perspective. So, and more recently, we're dealing with like customer support bottlenecks, etc. So all of those things are stressful, but those things are not very sharp stress. They're just sort of always there. So you just gotta develop ways to deal with it, and you try to improve your services to cope with it.
Okay. Well, it's been. It's sort of a stressful but interesting last few months as well. Some good news, some bad news, some opportunities. Let's talk about the really interesting bit of news from the last few weeks with El Salvador deciding to, I mean, something was quite shocking, decided to accept Bitcoin as an official currency. I mean, what's your take on that, and how significant is it?
Oh, I think it's very, very significant. So when I first read the news, I thought it was just that they legally recognize Bitcoin as a currency, but they actually went much further. They're basically recognizing Bitcoin as a legal tender means that all the shops, all the businesses within the country now have to accept cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin for transactions.
I didn't realize that. I thought it was the first one. They actually now have to accept. They have to accept it if you go. Isn't that a huge amount of infrastructure problem for them to suddenly build?
Absolutely. So so I think number one for the industries, this is great. Number two, and then I started to wrap my head around it. I was like, well, we can actually try. We always want to be the infrastructure services provider in this industry, and we want to see what we can help them do. There's a number of initiatives we're discussing, but I'll leave out the details. But we want to establish a ecosystem developer fund, hopefully in El Salvador, to help boost, grow the developer community there, and also to support the developer community there. We of course want to explore looking at providing infrastructure services, potentially like payment solutions, etc., that we have already. See how we can deploy that. But more fundamentally, though, this is a huge news for crypto, and more importantly, now other countries realize it. What's interesting is El Salvador. Many countries are dependent on U.S. dollars, and when the U.S. government prints a lot of more currencies, those other countries don't get the airdrops or the stimulus packages, and effectively the citizens of those countries are becoming poorer because they hold U.S. dollars and they don't get the additional printed amount in equal proportions. And using cryptocurrencies, using Bitcoin actually makes their citizens and their nation more solvent. So most people don't realize that until they think about it. But now, at least one country have thought about it, and I think other countries will follow suit very soon. And we're hearing a lot of unconfirmed news right now.
Interesting. I suppose the skeptic in me is worried that other countries will look and will find it interesting and will think, why don't we create our own cryptocurrency that we can monitor really easily? We can track every single citizen's transaction. This is perfect for us to be more sovereign, but also control our citizens more. Is that not something that you also sort of worry about, and that could be a consequence of what's happened in El Salvador?
I think that's definitely possible, but El Salvador's officially adopting Bitcoin, not their own central bank digital currency. They're not issuing a new one right now, at least. So if you're adopting Bitcoin, then those concerns are largely addressed. They don't really exist, other than people can monitor the Bitcoin blockchain to some extent. And for countries that want to issue their own central bank digital currencies, that concern is there. Mainly because but then the users have a choice, right? So the people have a choice unless they ban their citizens from owning Bitcoin, etc. So most central bank digital currencies will probably the first iterations of them will probably be, even though they're going to use the blockchain, encryption, decryption technology, etc. I think fundamentally they will have different properties. They probably will not have limited supply. That means they will have unlimited supply that the central bank can issue more and more whenever they want. That's usually not good for the people to hold that currency. And they probably will have restrictions on what type of transactions you can do, how big of a transaction you can do. Let's say you want to send, I don't know, a large chunk from one country to another, they probably will ask questions. So you will have less freedom, probably will have higher fees. So all of those features are important for the adoption of a currency. But now, given that there's a choice of using Bitcoin or other native cryptocurrencies, people have a choice, and the competition will be there to some extent. Okay. Some countries may outright just ban Bitcoin, but banning Bitcoin is very difficult. It's counter. They have to think about the negative consequences to their economy, because they will basically be closing off their economy to free trade. Which will have other long-term consequences they have to think about.
But let's regulators generally around the world are clearly worried not just about creating their own crypto, but they are worried about Bitcoin too. I mean, what do you think the regulatory wins are at the moment? Because it feels like a lot of countries are starting, including China recently, to sort of push back, crack down. We've all been expecting it for years. How do you read the regulatory sort of landscape at the moment?
It's always very tricky, given that we have 200 plus countries or sovereign nations in the world. There's always a big spectrum of different regulations. And even within each country, governments, regulators are not like one-person entities. They're usually large entities. And in most countries, there are multiple regulatory agencies regulating different aspects of financial transactions, technology companies, securities, derivatives, etc. And for them to come to agreement on a common standard is quite difficult. So what we see today is there's a big spectrum of regulatory styles. There are countries who are legally asking all of their merchants to accept Bitcoin, like El Salvador, and there are other countries who are still talking about banning Bitcoin. But there's quite a lot in between. But if we look at some of the largest economies in the world, in the U.S., we have a crypto exchange getting listed very recently on NASDAQ. That's a huge validation for the industry. That means, look, this is a legit business that's going public. in China, they're slightly negative towards crypto businesses, but they are issuing their own central bank digital currencies. In Japan, they've legally recognized Bitcoin as a legal tender, but since 2017, they did not force anyone to have to accept it, but they legally recognize that as a currency, and they legally license exchanges, etc.
So it is a bit mixed. It's not all kind of one way. But I've got to ask about Binance as well. And maybe you can't say much about it, but there's been a couple of investigations ongoing into your company as well. Can you tell us anything at all about that?
Not so much. So this is one of the problems where there's an uneven play field between journalists and businesses. As a business, regardless whether we have a investigation or any communication with any regulatory agencies, we can't comment about it. Even if there's a news piece, we can't deny it, we can't confirm it. It puts us in a very awkward position that we can't comment about it, and then the journalists, they will just write any sensational clickbait title, but if you read the article, the Bloomberg article specifically recently says, look, there's an investigation, but there's no information about wrongdoing. And then later on in the article, it talks about how we cooperated with the investigative agencies to help them solve their cases. So I can't comment on any specifics. It puts us in a very awkward position because we can't comment about that. But the news articles will just write anything they want, which is really unfair, to be honest.
Right, I'm already writing here about how you're refusing to comment on. I understand what you mean. Well, let's move on to some of the more interesting future-looking things. Now, I'll be honest, like probably a lot of people in the audience, I hear and even talk sometimes about NFTs and DeFi without fully understanding what I'm actually talking about. So for the benefit of those people who don't understand but are a bit afraid to ask the basics, just talk us through DeFi. What is it and why? I know you're excited about it. What is it that excites you about it?
Sure. I think DeFi the term decentralized finance can be applied to a much broader range of projects or services that's running on the blockchain, or just any decentralized financial services. What the reason DeFi between last year and this year, it more specifically targets what we call automated market makers or liquidity pools, where so basically decentralized liquidity pools, you can think about them as decentralized exchanges from a user perspective. How it works is that you can lend your crypto to a pool, and that pool will then use that crypto to provide liquidity. So basically, they will place orders, buy and sell orders on the exchange. And when average users come and want to buy and sell, the liquidity pools that has a lot of money placed both buy and sell orders, the spread is very thin. The retail buyers get much better price, and they want to trade on those. And when they trade, they pay a very minimal fee. But then people trade both ways. They buy and sell very often. And then the fees that the retail users pay are used to pay for interest for the people who loan money to the liquidity pool. So this is a two-sided market where the different players involved, and they help each other. And there's a valid business model, and people make money, etc. Everybody benefits. So that model works.
I'm going to have to. I'm not sure I understand it still, and that's probably my fault. But for an ordinary retail, let's say for a retail person like me, are you just saying it's going to be a lot easier for me with smaller amounts of money to get into finance? Is that really what this is about?
So let me put it more simply. In the DeFi space, there's you can use your crypto that you have to make loans and get interest, and those interests are paid by a real use case, and the money doesn't leave the platform. The money doesn't go somewhere. Relatively low risk. There's still some risk involved. So you can loan money, you can trade against it, get very good prices, and then so that's the sort of more fundamentals of it. Right. There's a whole slew of other things around it, of course, but
so that's the basics. And do you think institutional investors, the big investors, are going to get involved in this? And if so, how?
I absolutely think they should, because the interest rates you get on very solid DeFi projects are somewhere around 7, 8, 20%. Whereas if you put money in your bank, or even if you put money in your bank, you probably get 0.1, 0.25% interest. even if you give your money to a VC investor to invest for you, on average you get somewhere around 7 to 8%. And this is money that you can very high liquidity. You can put in money any day, take it out any day. You'll start from the day that you put money in, and so there's a lot of flexibility and liquidity around it. So I think institutional investors should absolutely put up to the point where I think a lot of banks should put their savings onto DeFi.
And you, by the way, you would say that, wouldn't you? And you either you personally, CZ, or Binance, I mean, what are your plans in the next few years for DeFi? What are you going to be doing?
So we want to participate. Actually, I think DeFi eventually is going to replace centralized exchanges. So we instead of somebody else replacing us, we want to invest heavily into this new technology and see how we can disrupt ourselves.
You're going to disrupt yourself? You're going to...
Yeah, so we sponsored a number of initiatives, including Binance Smart Chain. We actually did multiple blockchains, but Binance Smart Chain is having a very, very unexpected success, to be honest. It has like 4 to 5 times the transaction volume compared to Ethereum, and is 100% Ethereum compatible. It's growing really well. So we want to continue to make investments into the DeFi space. 4 to 5 years is a long time. We don't have a like top-down central plan of what's going to happen in the 4 to 5 years. We'll just continue to fund projects in this space and see how they turn out.
Okay, I want to open it out. We're getting questions in from the audience here that only I can see, or you can see too, and I'm going to pick a couple of them and see. Now, are you allowed to talk about your own investment strategies? Because obviously people want, what's CZ putting his money in? What exciting new coins and projects is he think are worth investing in? Are you allowed to tell us about any of that?
I think I'm pretty open about that. It's very simple. Myself, I don't have any personal investments. I personally hold some Bitcoin, but a majority of my value net worth is in BNB. So I only hold those 2 coins personally. I don't have time to look at other projects myself to buy or invest. So I actually am not a DeFi user, even though as an organization we do a lot in there. Everything I do is through Binance. Binance does a lot of investments, but Binance invests very heavily in the infrastructure services. Anything that's related to crypto, blockchain that people could use, we invest. So we want to help grow the industry. We don't really invest in things that people don't use. So meme coins, we're not really into that. But we, as an exchange, we provide trading services for that. We listed Dogecoin, a bunch of others. So our investment philosophy is whatever people use. So that's kind of in a very simple way. And myself, I don't own any shares in any companies. I don't own other coins. I don't get into that. I just focus 100% on Binance.
Right. Okay. And is it true you're thinking one day of maybe making Binance just completely sort of headquarterless, sort of a DAO somewhere in the cloud, doesn't exist in the physical realm?
So I think we achieved the first part, which is headquarterless. So we haven't really had a headquarter for a very, very long time. And we just figured that, and also when we look at the definition for headquarter, we don't have any place that satisfies that definition. Becoming a DAO, becoming a DAO is a little bit tougher. There's a lot of other things that needs to go on a true DAO. So I think we still have some distance to go from there, but that's the goal. I think theoretically speaking, you can have an organization with the right incentive structure so people do what they're supposed to do and everything works. So we're slowly trying to figure out what that structure is. But eventually, that is one of our goals. It'll be ideal if Binance can do that.
Right. So we'll watch Binance as a corporate structure as well as the sort of the business side of things. Speaking of meme coins, the question here is about what's your opinion on Elon Musk and his big push on Dogecoin? I mean, I thought you were going to say that you've invested your fortune in Doge, but you've already answered that. But what do you think about him getting so involved in the sort of promotion of the coin?
I think basically in a decentralized world, anyone can tweet whatever they want. That's their freedom. But as I don't particularly endorse large people, KOLs, people with large number of fans endorsing coins and not endorsing coins back and forth. So that swing mentality, that sort of swing action between supporting Bitcoin, then later on not supporting Bitcoin, etc. It creates a lot of what creates a lot of FUD, or creates a lot of confusion within the community, which is, I think he has the freedom to do it, but I personally think that that's not a very good thing to do as a responsible knowledge KOL.
Yeah, I found interesting. So obviously, a lot of the sort of people love Satoshi Nakamoto. There's sort of the idea that you're not relying on one person to make this work, but then weirdly, almost relying on an influential individual in another way to make the coin popular seemed to be against the philosophy of the coin itself, almost. But anyway, that's another thing. Quite another quick, which is going to be a good question for you. Probably the last one we've got before wrapping up is, what's the sort of skill set or advice that you would give to somebody who's looking to sort of repurpose their career into crypto? So they're going to work in crypto. What skills would you need to think about developing now?
I think the skill set is the same as the internet startups, to be honest. So if you're either developer, that's great. And if you're already a developer, it's pretty easy to learn about either DeFi or blockchain development, Solidity programming, etc. If you're, for example, a marketing person, you can do marketing for different projects within the space. If you're an HR person, it's very similar. The amount of technology that's specific to blockchain, you can learn about it. If you're a developer, you can learn deeper about it. If you're a marketing person, you can learn the concepts about it. That's not that difficult. It's like, the domain-specific knowledge is actually not that hard. It's really the core skills. If you're a developer, it's programming skills. If you're a marketing person, it's marketing skills. If you're a business person, it's different type of skills. So I think it's not that hard.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good. So that's reassuring for people, I'm sure. One final thing: what are you looking out for in the next 12 months? What do we need to be looking out for? Any exciting developments to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so this is very difficult to predict the 12-month, but NFTs are pretty hot. So we have multiple projects going on in the NFT space. Sports tokens, fan tokens are very interesting. Payments was one of the most obvious applications for cryptocurrencies. Hasn't taken off yet. We have a number of initiatives there. The blockchain itself, DeFi, etc. DeFi just started taking off last year, so it's still very early days. Blockchain fundraising is still going strong, and gaming could be another big aspect. There's a lot of different things. It's very hard to predict what's going to be hot within the next 12 months. So we just got to keep the eye open for it. And whenever the trend is starting to form, and we want to participate.
All right, CZ. Listen, thanks. So 30 minutes has gone like in a heartbeat. Thank you so much for sharing all that insight with us. I know you're a very, very busy man. And I think now we've probably got to hand back to Matthew.
And thanks, Jamie. Thanks, CZ, for joining us. Such a deep insight, really, into how you began Binance and then where it's grown from there, how substantial DeFi is, how many applications there are around this. I often think of digital transformation really of being cryptocurrencies part of it. Money is becoming digital. It's really that simple. So thanks really for, Jamie, you're up to the minute, but you also ask all the questions which people sometimes are too scared to ask, just because they're so simple. And thanks, CZ, for joining us, giving us your time and really giving us that deep insight. So look forward to seeing what next year brings. Obviously, a lot of talk of NFTs, payments coming up, as you say. So look forward to seeing what next year brings, and best of luck at Binance too.